What's up, simpletons? It's your boy, here to talk to you about how everything is going just fine. Welcome to a currently untitled series in which we talk about all the ways America is doing great things for Indian country and definitely isn't falling apart in front of our very eyes. Tonight, you'll hear about the perils of the New Mexico legislature and its struggle to do much of anything this session and what impacts their failure will have on Indigenous people on the res and in the city. Welcome to our studio. It's very cool. You got the air vent, you got the carpet, you've got it all. Shout out to our audience here tonight. Well, it's been nearly a month since the 30-day New Mexico legislative session ended with a constitutional mandate to only focus on spending, and the Roundhouse managed to pass fewer bills this session than any time since before I was born. I say at least because we literally couldn't dig any deeper on the legislature's website. It stops in 1996, also known as the year Stanford predicted global warming would be a net positive for humanity, and Titan of Cinema Space Jam premiered in theaters. 3.5 stars. The built-in veto period expired March 6th, with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham deciding not to send anything back to the legislative chambers aside from a line-item veto against giving more money to stripper wells, which are not what you think they are. Among the bills that did pass, highlights include instituting a 7-day waiting period to buy a gun, a prescription drug price transparency bill, a match fund for state agencies to get more federal funding, strengthened affirmative consent education in schools, a study of psilocybin for therapeutic treatments, a requirement to disclose the use of AI in political campaigns, a $100 million state housing fund, and a reinstituted missing and murdered Indigenous women's and relatives task force. Oh, and a whole lot of days. Aside from an electric vehicle tax credit and a bill imposing cleaner transportation standards that Exxon actually ended up supporting.
Matthew Hudville representing ExxonMobil. This clean transportation fuel standard can help preserve consumer choice.
Almost everything climate-related stalled out. When the best of your climate bills was already not much more than a slap on the wrist for the people literally destroying the only planet we know that harbors life in the universe, I'll tell you, things aren't looking good for old Earth. Let's see the clock. At a press conference a couple of weeks ago, the governor gave some remarks reflecting on the progress that the Roundhouse made over these brisk 30 days, discussing everything from gun control to climate change. It appears the governor is considering calling a special session to address her neglected public safety priorities. Unfortunately, many of these priorities would funnel even more money into law enforcement, these guys, rather than addressing the root causes of crime. Let's see how APD is taking the disappointing news.
The Albuquerque police released video of APD Chief Harold Medina crashing into another car.
I looked to my left and the intersection was cleared, and I thought that I had the car was going to pass before I got there. The occupant of the other vehicle was injured.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Sources tell us lawmakers are trying to convince the governor to include failed tribal education bills and paid family and medical leave, both priorities killed at the last minute by our best friends forever, the corporate Democrats. As far as paid family and medical leave is concerned, a program that currently exists in 13 states from Washington State to Washington, D.C., it passed 3 committees on the Senate side and then passed a 4th committee on the House side before heading to a final floor vote within the last 24 hours of the session. On a 34-36 vote, the bill failed, with 11 Democrats forming an alliance with the Republicans to keep the apocalypse of increased economic security for workers, better retention for employers, lower child mortality, and tackling the missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives epidemic in a substantive, institutional way. They just killed that because it was got in the way of freedom or something.
It's truly heartbreaking for them to promise me their vote and their support and yet turn back on their word and vote against this is truly heartbreaking.
She said the moment when people cheered as the bill didn't pass was difficult for her.
For me, it was them toasting to children dying alone.
Just like me in my relationships, when it comes to just having a normal, easy Valentine's Day, we always choose the option of spinning out, publicly embarrassing ourselves in the final moments, and then running back days later to ask for forgiveness. Fun fact, all of these guys are up for election this year. And nearly 6 years after a New Mexico court decided that New Mexico is violating its own constitution by not adequately serving low-income students, students with disabilities, English language learning students, and Indigenous students, who you should know make up 70% of the student body, the state is still at the bottom of educational rankings, and those groups of students are still faring badly. It's not for lack of trying either. Coalitions of Indigenous scholars, Latin civil rights groups, teachers, unions, parents, students have all been working together to get somewhere. The state hasn't let them make a lot of progress, though. Even though $1 billion has been put into the educational system over the past few years, comprehensive reform is still yet to pass. The legislature this year balked at passing a bill that would have created between $30 and $100 million in funding for Indigenous-focused education, though it passed the House in a unanimous 60-0 vote, to the chagrin of many of the coalitions. that have been working day and night to get something passed since 2019. Tribal Education Alliance Chair Regis Pecos noted the magnitude of needs within tribal communities and the competition over meeting those needs within and between tribes are lasting colonial legacies. They endure within the systems and institutions that shape the education of our children and the governance of our state. Institutional racism lies at the core of the deep educational disparities faced by Native students and that underpins the persistent lack of water, sewer, electricity, and road infrastructure in many tribal communities. This is all the more disturbing because New Mexico is experiencing unparalleled revenues and budget surpluses. With the combination of a historic lack of resources in this state and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic that has obliterated youth mental health, our state's young people are still getting an extremely bad deal.
My son deserves, just like any other child in the nation, quality education, equal opportunity to succeed. And that's basically just what we want, is just, that our children get the help they need.
Even though New Mexico is facing record revenues to the tune of $30 billion as of 2021, the failure of this legislature to pass critical social services and climate action will mean one of the most poverty-stricken states in the country will continue to be the home of the richest bohemians you've ever seen, while the rest of us have to make do with rising inflation and a burning planet.
It's love, it's compassion, it's humanity, it's good business, it's doing the right thing for folks. I know that there's a lot of concern around the workforce being down, but honestly, when you take care of your people take care of you.
With a mere 107 bills passed this year by the legislature, the lowest in over 25 years, it seems that this body is kind of falling apart at the seams. To find out more about what's going on up in Santa Fe, I'm talking to Maria Blanco, meteorologist and part-time Etsy supervillain. How's it going, Maria?
Not good, Peter. It's really windy and nobody's here.
Wait, Maria, that doesn't look like the roundhouse.
What are you talking about? Google Maps says this is the roundhouse. I'm at the roundhouse.
No, I don't think... Are you at a Texas roadhouse?
Wouldn't you like to know, Boomer?
The legislature used to pass 600, 700 bills a year. But ever since 2020, that number hasn't even gotten up to 400. Do you think the legislature's inability to keep the lights on consistently might have a detrimental effect on their ability to pass bills?
Not at all, senor. You see, the coronavirus pandemic has created a cacophony of bad vibes here at the Roundhouse. You see half the guys walking around here? They're like the undead Mitch McConnell. Respect your elders.
I'm not sure that's it. I mean, that's probably a part of it, but what about the whole 30-day legislative session every other year? What about the fact that legislators rejected the option to stop being the only legislature in the country that doesn't pay its legislature?
You're so cynical. You neglect the progress our state has made lately, such as since 2023, our state now has an official smell.
According to our research, the only things New Mexico gives their legislators right now is federally stabilized mileage and a per diem that wouldn't even cover the cost of a hotel room for a night in Santa Fe.
You don't understand that paying legislators would further erode our trust in institutions. Without a proper salary, where would the perspective of the working man come from? Those free steakhouse dinners and weed gummies are a reward for a job well done. And a sacrifice made for America.
It looks like most legislators are business owners or landowners or lawyers. That doesn't sound very worker to me. I mean, all of this sounds like the last gasps of traditionalists and capitalists who want to maintain a sense of decorum rather than, actually do their jobs.
Nuh-uh, sounds like fake news got you again.
The legislature rejected a bill that would have made it a crime to pose as a fake elector in an election, even though New Mexico is one of the states that in 2020 where Republicans organized to try to steal that election.
Peter, cool kids like me know that democracy is a jostle of cat and mouse. Yin for yang, tit for tat. Why even bother if we're not gonna have fun? Don't you remember the electricity when the states were deciding whether or not abortion was gonna be illegal? It was like crack for nerds. How do you think Hillary Clinton was elected?
Hillary wasn't elected, and you're 9 years older than me.
And you're an asshole. Go Bears.
Well, that was, illuminating.
Where are you? Looking for you. Get it. His car's gone. No. Where are you? He's gone.
We will now take a roll call.
Madam Chairman, I raised my hand.
You already spoke for over half an hour, if not an hour.
Madam Chairman, if this is supposed to be a deliberative body, Madam Chairman.
That's all. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, okay. Hi guys, this is John Block.
With all of these shenanigans and ego trips having a corrosive effect on what we've been cosplaying as a democracy for the past couple hundred years, I think it's time to take a closer look on what we missed out on this legislative session. To help me dig deeper, I talked with State Representative Angelica Rubio. How do you think this session went?
Yeah, I mean, this session was hard. Like, I'm really happy about a lot of what we accomplished in the budget, but there was just a lot of different things that I wish we, and when I say we, I mean Democrats, because we're a trifecta and we should be doing like better things. And I don't feel like we spent a lot of time doing better things. The stuff that was really important to me, it was really like making long-term investments in housing, issues related to mental health. Like, we just have a huge like opioid addiction problem. And so to be able to invest in some of those areas to me was really like important. I grew up in the southeastern part of the state in the Permian Basin. And so when we center workers and frontline communities in addressing climate, we also tried to push money into the departments to really like hold the line on making sure that enforcement around some of like this oil and gas stuff was made. So there's like line items that I think are important that don't necessarily ever make it to the public.
I've heard a lot of things about the surplus. From my perspective, having $3.5 billion and only spending $500 million on that, a little more than that, I don't know, it just doesn't seem prudent given the depths of disparities that New Mexico is facing in terms of poverty and houselessness and lack of social services.
This is the 8th year that I've been serving in the legislature, and one of the things that I have been prioritizing is, of course, the modernization piece, but then also diversifying our economy away from oil and gas, because we don't have any other type of economic driver like oil and gas. We have to put enough money away for the years that we're not going to have oil and gas. We do have the ability to make long-term investments that are sustainable, that I know we can but I just don't think that the political will exists to do it, because I think people operate out of fear. Oil and gas is not going to be here for much longer, whether we do it through policy or not. It's going to run out.
I don't know if I'm misremembering or not, but last year there was the Economic Transition Act.
Yeah, I was the sponsor for House Bill 188.
Do you think there's a chance of something like that coming back? Or is this legislature at this stage unequipped to deal with a problem that big?
What we are facing globally is, it's catastrophic. I'm dreading the summer. I live in Las Cruces. I certainly feel the sense of urgency to do something. And I think one of the reasons why I push so hard on the just transition piece and centering workers and frontline communities is because it's easier to think in terms of numbers versus climate and the environment. And I'm having a hard time getting folks to really see the intersection between both, even though I believe that New Mexico could be a beacon for the rest of the world on how we champion policy that really supports and drives solutions. I don't feel like there are people in our legislature that have that political will. Definitely on my list for the 60 days to make sure that we still do it. But there's a lot of organizing that needs to happen, not just in our communities, but within the legislators that we elect. And it's an election year, so.
From your vantage point, which pressure strategies work on legislators to actually change their mind about things or place some things on a higher priority? Because I feel like there's a lot of cynicism with my peers and with myself that these governmental bodies fundamentally ignore their constituents and will do whatever capital tells them to do.
Yeah. I get that in terms of the cynicism, because I feel it too. I think that was one of the things that I left with the session this past year is I felt the cynicism that much more than I ever have before. And I think part of it is, of course, what we're seeing globally, what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in the rest of the world. And the fact that we can't even excuse my language, get our shit together here in New Mexico, that adds to the frustration. And at the same time, that's why I love to be centered in community and be surrounded by organizing and organizers. I don't want to put so much power in elections, because I do think elections matter, But I believe that organizing and building power for our people is that much more powerful. We already know that electing Dems isn't always going to help us out. So much of the legislation that we did get through, there's a TANF pilot program, there's the apprenticeship fund bill that was passed, there was clean fuels bill. It's just taken so much work to do, but we got there. And I feel like that's not where we're going to be transformative. We're going to be transformative in the streets and in our communities. The legislature is just a tool to build that power. And I think that it's important that we have to just try to focus on both simultaneously.
So I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on was modernization. I don't even know where to start. What happened?
I was elected in 2016, and I've been introducing a version of this legislation every year since then. I think what keeps me going on this issue is that at least the debate is happening, but it's also not as awful as it used to be. Now I feel like there are legislators who are straight up okay, I can see the reasoning behind it now. I get it. And I think with the amount of money that we had in the budget this year and just the amount of responsibility that comes with our jobs, I think people are starting to really get how critical it is to have a salary. There's a lot of elections happening next year, especially in the Senate. There's a bunch of open seats. There's some really critical races happening that I'm hopeful that next year is the year that we pass a constitutional amendment to establish salaries, to create the commission to establish salaries.
Well, I guess that's everything on my end, unless you have anything else you want to say. I
just want to say to keep at it, and I recognize that it's really easy to fall into the cynicism. It doesn't feel great, but I wouldn't do this work without the community that is around. And so I just urge folks to just continue being in community with other people. And it's slow work. That work is slow, but I see this more in terms of the long game, and I'm here for the long game. And so I really want everyone else to feel like they can be a part of that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Why does nobody want to work anymore?
Oh, really?
Why does nobody want to work anymore? That's human nature, and a lot of people don't like working.
I thought that nobody, everybody I know is working.
Why don't people want to work?
They don't understand what work means these days.
There he is. Why doesn't anybody want to work anymore?
I think if you get a break coming off the COVID and some of the services that are being provided, it's fine, but they won't be there forever.
Unsatisfied. Excuse me, Mr. President. Why does nobody want to work anymore?
I don't know.
Well, I think we've learned a lot these past few weeks. We learned what a bill is, how a bill becomes a law, and how a bill stops becoming a law. Primary season is already in full swing, with New Mexico's up on June 4th. The presidential election may be a complete clusterfuck, but there are tons of state and local races which will have a far more direct impact in your community than a rematch of...
Have you scheduled the Come to Jesus meeting with Bibi Netanyahu?
No.
They call her Pocahontas. But you know what? I like you.
Much of the state Senate is up for election, and the entirety of the state houses. Depending on where you live, there may also be local positions and decisions to be made. It's clear this legislature isn't working for us, and it appears that they're scared to be working in general. We did it, boys! We did it! We fucking did it! We did it!